Hey guys, it's Tom, and you're not seeing or hearing double. That's a video clip of me, and you're hearing me. They're not synced up. I shot this video for this video. That's super confusing. I shot this video for this video, whatever. So we're gonna be talking about boom and lav mics and combining them. Well, let me just let this guy set it up. This is a 2 microphone recording. I have a shotgun mic that's about 6 feet or 2 meters that way. Too far to really get anything usable. It's a Sennheiser MKH60. It's a fairly dead room, but it's still very distant. And then I have a WLAV Pro by Deity right about here on my collar. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it's right on my collarbone. And what I'm going to do is I'm doing this recording to show that combining 2 microphones gives you a better result than just using one. We used to just use one, either boom or lav. And nowadays we tend to use all the mics that sound decent. So the struggle is the boom can be too far and the lav gets clothing noise. Even though I'm just wearing a cotton shirt, you still get clothing noise anytime an actor moves, or I'm just gonna do shoulder rolls most of the video to get that nice scratchy clothing sound. It's also generated from the tape or whatever sticky element used to secure. All right, you get enough of that. The idea is that lav mics have clothing noise and boom mics are often too distant because of multicam shoots or inexperienced boom operators or just the framing and the lighting. Sometimes the boom is very far, and you can hear in this, like, the boom sounds okay-ish. You're still going to get clothing noise if the actors are doing anything except for standing still. But it doesn't sound good on its own. And then the lav, you're still going to get clothing noise if the actors are doing anything except for standing still. So if I wasn't moving, it would sound fine. Like, you could use the lav on its own, but people move. So you'll hear later in the video too, I actually cover it with a leather glove. Classic audio challenge, which is that the boom is too far and the lav mic is too muffled. Yeah, so there the lav is basically unusable because the clothing rustle is way louder than the signal. It's also really muffled, so there's problems with both of these microphones. The issue here is one that we will all face. Anybody that works on dialogue or production recordings that have multiple channels, which is that the individual channels by themselves don't sound great. And in order to get something that sounds good even, you have to combine them. And this goes contrary to one of my dialogue editing videos where I said I like to pick one channel. Generally, you can get by with that if the channels are good or there's an obvious choice, but I've found that as I work more as a dialogue editor and less as a mixer, it's better for me to provide the mixer with options, and that means cutting all the channels that I can. Like, all the channels that I have that are usable, I'm going to cut them. I'm going to make them sound good together as a composite, meaning the boom and lav are going to play at the same time, and it's going to sound good like that. And I'll try to go in and clean up by soloing, like, the lav, and by soloing the boom, just so I make sure I get everything. But what I'm presenting to the mixer is a composite of all of the microphones. If I have multiple lavs, which is very common, then I'll checkerboard the lavs under the boom, and I'll cut back and forth. This video is not going to cover editing layout. It's literally just about combining microphones. And you can apply this to bigger examples where there's 3, 6, 10, 12 lavs, whatever. The basic idea is going to be the same. Tools we're cutting this in Pro Tools, and we are going to be using Auto-Align Post by Sound Radix. I like to turn that small when I'm working. Normally I'll have this on a second or third monitor, but I'm doing a screen cap, so it's all going to live on one. So I use Auto-Align Post, and then I also am going to be using RX Connect. So those are the only two plugins we're going to need to use for this session today. We're not going to get into things like AI, voice isolation, and voice resynthesis, and all this other malarkey. Very simple, very basic techniques of combining mics. You can hear, let's go to the good section. You can hear that the boom Combining two microphones gives you distant, the lav. Combining two microphones gives you, sounds good until I start moving. And then combining two microphones gives you a better result than just using one. It's okay, but if you have a really tuned ear, you can hear there's some phase issues. And by zooming in on the waveform, you'll actually see them, that they're not time aligned, and they're also out of phase. The lav phase needs to be flipped. Back in the old days before auto align post 2, we would nudge this back by a couple of subframes or samples and flip the polarity. But auto align post takes care of all that to you, and it takes care of all that for you, and it goes further by doing a dynamic mode that actually will track and chase timing changes. Like if a person walks close to a mic or they turn their head, it's going to cover most of that stuff. Every once in a while it misses something and you have to fix it manually, but it gets you, like, I'd say 98% of the way there. So I have auto align post open. The first thing I need to do is make sure it's in individual files, clip by clip. It's in mono mode, so it's going to process each mic. If I had multiple lavs, it's going to look at each one and compare that to the key track or the reference track. So that's fine. What I'm going to do is set this to the boom. I want to align the lavs to the boom. There are times where you want to align the boom to the lavs. For example, if the boom is like way far out, 20 feet out, you still want to use it, but it's so distant from the sound source that it's actually, the boom is behind in sync by a frame, which happens. Like, sound is slower than light, so the sound will arrive late compared to picture. Then you can align the boom to the lavs. But generally, I like to use the boom as the sync source for aligning, because then I can have one source. I know it's been monitored on set, and I can align multiple lavs to one thing instead of picking one lav to align the other mics to. So anyways, that's set to boom. Now I'm going to select lav and I'm going to render it and watch what happens to the waveform. So it flipped upside down and now it's time aligned. You can see right there, peak, peak, it's all good. And let's have a listen to this right here. This is going to be, I'll hit undo so you can hear the unaligned difference. Microphones gives you a better result than just using one. We used to just use one, either boom or lav, and nowadays we tend to use all the mics that sound decent. So that's aligned, now unaligned. Combining two microphones gives you a better result than just using one. We used to just use one, either boom or lav, and nowadays we tend to use all the mics that sound decent. So, and now I'm going to flip back and forth. Combining two microphones gives you a better result than just using one. We used to just use one, either boom or lav, and nowadays we tend to use all the mics that sound decent. So already a huge improvement just by aligning those mics. We're going to run into some clothing noise later on. So what I'm going to do is copy that down to this OG lav, OG meaning original. And that way we can kind of listen to the pre-processed result. Later in this little clip, I did cover the lav with a leather glove. So I hit the mic even. Thick outfits, or it's buried under a coat. So there's the mic right there. I'm going to cover it with the lav, and I'm going to keep rolling my shoulders and keep talking to you guys. That's embarrassing. But yes, so it changes. I tap, and then it changes right there. So I'm going to make a cut, because this sound in this area is super muffled and noisy. And then this sound is pretty clean. Like, there's some video because it's ridiculous. And it's better with the video element. You can hear the clothing rustle there. So I do need to clean this up a little bit, but not as much as when it's covered, completely buried. So we got it aligned. Let's just go ahead and send individual files. Have to change that to clip by clip. Please fix that iZotope. Send to iZotope. Now, I like to use a module chain. And I have all kinds of different presets for this. Let's go with Noisy Lav. I like to use module chains when I don't have time to go in and individually clean up every single problem. What I'm going to do is, I'm doing this recording. Let's go. We tend to use all the mics that sound decent. So too far, and the lav gets clothing noise. Even though I'm just wearing a cotton shirt, you still get Clothy noise anytime. Okay, so here, you still get Clothy noise anytime. You can hear all this high frequency stuff is what I'm going to be trying to clean up. There's some ticks and pops too, but if I'm just dialogue editing, it's a feature film, it's a union show, like the quality of the work has to be pristine. I generally won't use the module chain. I'll go in and clean up each one individually. It takes forever, but that's what they're hiring me for on bigger shows. On something that's fast turnaround, module chain it is. So I've got dehum. I'm actually going to turn that off. There's no hum. I've got decrackle. That's probably fine for settings. Deplosive is fine. I've got derustle here. I'm going to turn this up a little bit. I don't like to push it too hard. And then I do have, let me see what plugin I've got. I've got Acon Extract Dialogue, but I'm not going to use that because it's still fairly clean. So I think that's going to be a good starting point. Let me just hit render. It does take a little bit of time because it's running each one of these sequentially. But if you set up module chains, it can speed up your workflow. I'll try to have one for each show if there's consistent noise problems. If they're inconsistent, then doing it piece by piece works, or having just a general works too. So let's listen. I'm just going to do shoulder rolls most of the video to get that. There's still some pretty decent noise up there. So what I'm going to do now is use dialogue isolate, but I'm only selecting the problem frequency range, which is up here. I don't really like to use dialogue isolate because it makes things sound digital and processed, but just for sake of time, I'm going to do it to this whole clip. And I cringe. I cringe because I don't like to do this, but most of you are not going to have the patience to go and select each cloth rustle and spectral repair it out. The main thing is I don't want to get rid of the S's in the sibilant sounds. I'm just going to do shoulder rolls most of the video to get that nice scratch. That improved it quite a bit. It did improve it quite a bit. I'm just going to do shoulder rolls most of the video to get that nice scratchy clothing sound. It's also generated from the tape or whatever sticky element used to secure it. So that's as far as I'm going to push that. I don't want to do too much. And it's very easy with the tools we have to just do way too much. So I'm going to call that good. So there's the mic right there. I'm going to cover it with outfits, or it's buried under a coat. So there's the mic right there. I'm going to process this so and mic tap separately. So I'll show you how to get rid of stuff manually. Obviously, this is a huge transient noise because I did this. So there's the mic right there. Tap the mic. I'm pretty sure I did that on purpose. So we're going to have to take out this transient, which is me tapping the mic. So there's the mic, and there's another one. This one will be easy. I can actually just copy this fill and paste it. Shift Option V. So there's the mic right. I got rid of the second one because it wasn't on top of a word. Let me just do a little extra here to get rid of that tiny bump. And then declick. Okay. So I'm using keyboard shortcuts. 3 for me is spectral repair attenuate. 4 is spectral repair replace. 1 is declick. And those are kind of my most used ones. So this, let me try to declick this and see what that does. So not quite. Let me undo. Let me try spectral repair attenuate on this. So that's good. So that got rid of that part of the transient, but I still have this low part. So I'm going to do declick. So didn't quite get it. I'm going to try spectral repair replace. So it unfortunately replace does this where it can't deal with dynamic pitch changes, so it's created like a sustained pitch right there. So is that better than the pop sound? So I'm not sure. The other thing, sometimes this will work, is using dialogue isolate on just a tiny selection, like really hitting it hard. So there's still a pop in there. So it's probably, yeah. So it's this stuff right here. I'm going to use deconstruct, which is kind of my favorite secret weapon. I want to take out the noisy. I'm going to break this into bands too. I want to take out the noisy and leave the tonal. So noisy's down. I'm going to render that. Left some clicks from the processing. So I want to take this out too. There's still a little bit of a transient there. That's going to be really tough to get out. I'm just cycling back and forth between declick and spectral repair. It's like shaving something, like shaving a piece of wood. You just take off a layer at a time. All right, let me try spectral repair, replace just on these frequencies. That's pretty good. I'm gonna do deconstruct one more time here. Okay. That's probably as good as I'm gonna be able to get it. I'll do a before and after so you can hear the difference. So here's a after cleanup on just this section. Outfits, or it's buried under a coat. So there's the mic, and here's a before. Outfits, or it's buried under a coat. So there's the mic right out. Huge improvement. Definitely a little processed, but when I combine it with the boom, maybe it'll be okay, question mark. For now, let's keep rolling on this lab cleanup. We're going to send this really dirty stuff to iZotope, and I don't need to see this, thank you. We're going to do a module chain, but we're going to increase the settings because this is the super noisy glove over the mic part, and these are just going to have to go up in order to get anything usable out of it. It's very sad. You can see each one of these spiky guys here is a shoulder shrug. And let's see what, if we undo, it definitely got some, it attenuated them, but I think I'm going to take a different approach with this. Let me find,
Talking to you guys. This is the classic.
Okay, there's a nice clean sample there. I'm actually going to use, I'm going to hit Command F and do find similar events and see how good. The problem is it's going to do the whole selection, and I don't necessarily want it to deal with all these little guys, like all the words and stuff. Let me do a smaller selection like that and see what happens if I hit spectral repair. Let's start with that. So there's the mic right there. I'm gonna cover it with the lab. Ooh, that's nasty. Okay, now that I've attenuated, so there's before any processing, I'm gonna hit redo. And there's after. I've already knocked down the high frequencies on each of those a little bit by doing find similar event in iZotope. Now I should be able to back off. That's probably still okay. But doing the individual sounds, ideally you'd go and highlight each and every one, and there's probably like 100 or so. So it would take a long time, but the correct way to do it is to go and highlight the individual problems and zap them out with spectral repair. But that takes a long time. So let's just see.
On my shoulders. Keep talking to you guys. This is the classic audio challenge, which is that the boom is too far and the lav mic is too muffled, too noisy. So when you solo each channel, you think, man, this audio sucks. And you can get a perfectly usable result, even if it's really bad, by just cleaning up the individual tracks and then combining them. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that. And that's probably enough noise for now.
I'm going to get this little pop out here. There's a couple of these, but I'm just going to get this one. So highlight, declick, it's gone.
It's probably enough noise for now.
On its own, this is still bad. It sounds rough. And this might be one that you guys would send to like one of those voice AI cloners to try and clean up. If that's the way you want to roll, go for it. But I'm looking at the composite of these two channels, the boom and the lav, as how can I get these to play together and get a usable result without resorting to any of that fancy AI stuff. So if this is good enough, then we're going to call this a win. I'm going to mute the raw lav and we're just going to listen. We heard the soloed lav in iZotope.
And I'm going to keep rolling my shoulders and keep talking to you guys. This is the classic audio challenge, which is that the boom is too far.
So the lav sounds bad. And I'm going to keep rolling my shoulders and keep talking to you guys. This is the classic audio challenge, which is boom sounds distant, but probably better than the lav. But now when we combine them, I'm going to cover it with the lav. And I'm going to keep rolling my shoulders and keep talking to you guys. This is the classic audio challenge, which is that the boom is too far and the lav mic is too muffled or too noisy. So when you solo each channel, you think, man, this audio sucks. And you can get a perfectly usable result, even if it's really bad, by just cleaning up the individual tracks and then combining them. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that. And that's probably enough noise for now. As you can hear, combining the two mics is a much better result than soloing each one. I can still hear some clothing noise in there, but I'm going to leave a little bit in so that when this is mixed, the mixer can decide, is it passable or do you want to completely remove it out with something like cedar or one of the other noise reduction tools out there. Always check with the mixer if they want it squeaky clean, like no clothing noise at all. You're going to have to dig into doing each one individually by selecting and doing spectral repair, attenuate, horizontal, or using some other tool if you don't have the time for that kind of care. For now, I think we're cleaned up enough to where we can listen to a comparison between the cleaned up lav and the raw lav. So let's do that. Let's go where I start moving. Okay, right there. What do you want to listen to first? Let's do the original but aligned lav to get that nice scratchy clothing sound. It's also generated from the tape or whatever sticky element used to secure it. So no matter how good you rig a mic, you're still going to get clothing noise if the actors are doing anything except for standing still. So I'm rolling my shoulders, I'm turning my head, I'm doing all this to generate some nice noise on. Here's a good little piece to listen to on the original lav recording. So I'm rolling my shoulders, I'm turning my head, I'm doing all this to generate some nice noise on the track. I know it looks really silly. So I'm rolling my shoulders, I'm turning my head, I'm doing all this to generate some nice noise on the track. I know it looks really silly. Now let's listen to this muffled section. We'll listen to the original lav and boom combined, and then I'll switch to the cleaned up. I'll just switch back and forth so you guys have a more immediate comparison. There, I'm going to cover it with the lav. And let me actually get that mic pop in there too. Outfits, or it's buried under a coat. So there's the mic right there. I'm going to cover it with the lav. And I'm going to keep rolling my shoulders and keep talking to you guys. This is the classic audio challenge, which is that the boom is too far and the lav mic is too muffled or too noisy. So when you solo each channel, you think, man, this audio sucks. And you can get a perfectly usable result, even if it's really bad, by just cleaning up the individual tracks and then combining them. So I'm going to show you way less clothing noise on the cleaned up version. It is a little more muffled because of that cleanup. It's always a balancing act on how far to take the processing and what the benefit is of that. You get a cleaner signal, but you get maybe less overall sound quality. Let's just listen to this mic bump. I'll go ahead and loop the playback so you can hear the difference. We'll do the boom mic plus the original lav, and then I'll switch over to the cleaned up lav with the boom mic. Outfits, or it's buried under a coat. So there's the mic right there. I'm going to cover it with the lav. Outfits, or it's buried under a coat. So there's the mic right there. I'm going to cover it with the lav. You can hear the EQ shift. That could be easily, sort of easily, I guess, dealt with an EQ automation, or splitting it off to another track, which is really smart to do. Or you could use EQ match. I generally don't, if I'm playing all the mics at the same time, I don't have to really shape it with the EQ as much as if I was playing each mic individually, because I'm listening to the composite of both the boom and the lav. And so I understand the lav is going to carry more of the low end than the boom. And if I have good high frequencies on the boom, I'm not going to try to compensate by doing this on the lav, because as soon as you do that, well, what's going to happen to that? You're going to get the Clothy noise back in there.
I'm going to keep rolling my shoulders, keep talking to you guys. This is the classic audio challenge, which is that the boom is too far.
So I like to just use the mics with their strengths. The strength of the lav on this buried mic placement is the low frequencies, giving a little more of that low richness and presence to the voice, and then the boom keeps, even though it's 6 feet away, it is keeping that high frequency presence in the kind of overall room sound. That is good enough for this video on the cleanup. Definitely better, less Clothy noise on the cleaned up tracks. And again, just mostly to demonstrate, playing both mics, both mediocre mics together creates an acceptable result. Like, you can take two kind of crappy channels, combine them, clean up each kind of individually. Generally the boom I won't clean up very much, and the lavs I'll hit harder. When you do that, the sum of the two mics playing together is much stronger than just picking one or the other. The other thing I mentioned, I have the camera mic up here, is you can align stuff to the camera mic if you want. Sometimes the camera will be right up in the actor's face and the boom is a mile away. Don't be afraid to ask for the camera audio, or if you're on set, strap a shotgun to the camera. I see that done on action sequences for big budget stuff pretty often. It's not just there for scratch audio. With auto-align post, you can actually use the sound. And for documentaries especially, where maybe they only have a lav on the person they're following and then they have the mic on the camera, slap those two together, use the boom or a camera mic for adding life and ambience and a sense of place and like surroundings, and then use the lav as a spot mic, basically, kind of like how you would do for a drum kit. This is the snare mic or the kick drum mic, to kind of punch up the overhead mic, which is kind of an interesting way to look at it if you've done any music production. So that is the demo for today on cleaning up a boom and lav synchronized aligned recording using both mics at the same time. I've switched to doing this on most projects I work on, whether I'm just dialogue editing or if I'm mixing. It saves the decisions for post, or it can take two mediocre channels and combine them to create a much more cohesive dialogue track. If you have any tips on using multiple microphones in a dialogue edit or cleaning up Clothy noise in a lav, go ahead and drop them below in the comments. And feel free to do your own video on this and share the knowledge with other people. Until the next video, I'll see you then.